Alright everyone, once in a while I like to cover end times bullshit because it never actually comes true. It's like if you actually understand a lot of the religious, the theological basis for some of the apocalyptic writings throughout time, you'll understand exactly why most of this stuff is nonsense. For instance, the Mayan calendar has nothing to do with the end times. It has to do with the end of an age, a long count cycle, and the beginning of another. It's not, hey, the world goes away completely forever, everyone dies. It's more it's predicting, vaguely speaking, in a very metaphoric sense, an era of problems, which kind of came true if you look at what's happening in the wake of 2012. But it's not the end of the world. It's just the struggle at the end of a cycle as a new one is born. A new age, the dawning of the age of Aquarius sort of stuff. Ragnarok, the prophecy of Ragnarok. What follows it? Regeneration. Within even Christendom, even that tale is technically speaking a tale of resurrection thereafter, after a sort of doomsday. You have the apocalyptic stuff, but what ends up happening thereafter? Oh yeah, the New Jerusalem, which is basically a giant golden cube, comes down, sits on top of a big mountain. I think the cube is supposedly like the size of Brazil, only it's also like 1,000 miles tall. And that's where people live, and there's a giant tree in it and stuff, and it defies, physics, and it's crazy, and God sits in there and, I don't know, judges people or something. I'm being purposely vague. It's supposed to be funny. But now David Meade comes out and says, oh, Nibiru's coming. It's the end times. This time it's for real. Now, I think he's predicted the end times several times before, if I remember correctly. They tend to. You always have these situations where someone who's like, a religious a leader, so-called. They tend to lead from behind. It's like their flock, they expect them to wear sackcloth and they fly first class. This is what usually happens in a megachurch too, though. It's not limited to end times nuts. Now, they come forth and say, well, the world's going to end on such and such a day or in such and such a, relatively specific span of time. And they preface this on, I numbered the Bible. I fathomed the depths of God's knowledge or something. I read some ancient scripture from some other culture that people are too dumb to interpret properly. And then they're wrong, because you've got to, generally speaking, in order to get a lot of attention, you have to make sure that your end times prediction is contemporary, that it's happening relatively quickly. Convince people in a couple of years the world's going to end. Here's how and here's why, and you should believe me. So sell everything you own and then give me the proceeds, basically. God commands us to make a fake spaceship, and then the world will end. The world will blow up, and we'll hurtle through space to the New Jerusalem. And some weird cult stuff happens sometimes. And I don't think Meade is telling people to drink arsenic or anything, so that's an improvement on some of these groups. Heaven's Gate. Apparently, by the way, as an aside, Heaven's Gate, anyone who wanted to leave the group, they didn't actually compel them to kill themselves. It's actually an interesting case of a cult that didn't actually force its members to carry out their final suicide mission in order to, I guess, go up onto Hale Bop and survive and come back as starseeds or whatever weird. They still have a website. There's still former members maintaining it that decided not to take the trip or something. It's still there. Look up Marshall Applewhite's speeches. He never blinks, which is kind of creepy. Now, if you look at the way he looks, I can understand this person looks like he would make an end times prediction. But now Nibiru's coming. It's funny because Nibiru has been coming for quite some time. I can remember, a decade ago, people were talking about, this dark star or twin planet or whatever on the other side of the sun. Somehow it's suddenly going to move out of orbit and smash into us. Or this object that we just can't see for some unknown reason that nonetheless is big enough to actually pose a threat to us, is hurtling towards us from deep space. How do you know that it's there if you can't see it? I'm not sure. I guess, they do weird scientific calculations. They call it science. So we get over and over again, Nibiru, Nibiru, Nibiru. Nibiru is why 2012. Nibiru is why Ragnarok. Nibiru is going to destroy us. Nibiru is going to come and strip our atmosphere away. I can remember with Comet Ison, people were worried it was a plague comet. And it was funny. I mean, it's really, really fun to talk about. It's fun to speculate and entertain the idea of, maybe apocalyptic things will happen. That'll shake life up, make it a little more interesting. And while apocalyptic things, by human standards, tend to happen within any given generation. There are, apocalyptic things are quite common, especially with warfare the way it is in modern times. The idea of a planet that you cannot see, or brown dwarf, or, it depends on what they class it as. The different conspiracy theorists, I don't think, can even quite agree on what Nibiru is. They say, well, this object, you can't see it, you can't sense it, but don't worry, it's there and it's coming, and then they give a date. And it never happens. It was like, I think, was it mid-May a couple years ago, somebody was it Pastor Manning or somebody like that was saying Nibiru was going to smash into us, or something like that. I think there have been 5 or 6 widely sort of televised, given significant attention, end times prophecies in the last decade or so. You've got the Georgia Guidestones, 2012, Ragnarok actually. That was, I think, 2014 that they were saying. And then we had the polar vortex, so people started thinking maybe it was true. And then you have, like, various Nibiru stuff, aliens are coming, World War III. World War III, though, really, with the Syria strikes and Russia's condemnation, with the increasingly bipolar world sinking back into the depths of the Cold War, my best money would be on a nuclear war at this point. It would be essentially mankind will co-opt nature. We'll kill ourselves off with a massive mushroom cloud before nature gets the chance to unleash the next Black Plague or Spanish flu, before Yellowstone manages to go off, before a world killer asteroid manages to nail us. Those things are also inevitable in the long span of time. You do realize that, right? There will be another, like, Black Plague situation at some point in the future. It will happen. It's inevitable because evolution exists. You have to stop believing in evolution to ignore the inevitability of that happening. In fact, I'd say probably because the world's population is higher and because of disease-resistant drugs proliferating, it's getting more and more likely that it's going to happen more and more often, unless we delve into genetic research or something like that in order to cure disease, make ourselves immune to everything. Unless we want to transhumanize ourselves, we're probably fucked. There will be a world killer asteroid, statistically speaking, that hits us, in the next million years. That'll knock mankind back to the Stone Age if we don't have a good century to prepare for it first. We're going to need more seed vaults at that point. We're going to need human vaults. It's going to be difficult. You're going to have to know where it impacts, too. You're going to have to get used to a prolonged period underground. Hope that you have enough nuclear material to power things in your little underground metropolis for half a century. It's possible. It's certainly possible to maintain humanity after such an event. It's just going to be really difficult. You need a huge amount of organization worldwide and a lot of resources to save a very small number of people that will probably be attacked by everyone else who wants into your underground city. Could be that the logistics dooms the plan and kills off basically all of mankind, or very nearly so. You'd think of Yellowstone. If Yellowstone goes off, it won't just be the U.S. that gets fucked, essentially. One of the main grain belts of the world would be depopulated. That might be a little bit of a problem considering the fact that we basically feed 500 million people on this planet. The food shortage alone would doom a large swath of mankind. Disease would break out, probably spread due to global travel, even in the wake of such a disaster, and then you'd have several years where crops would fail all over the world, and most of mankind would starve. More people would starve to death or die of disease in the aftermath over the subsequent few years than would die in the blast itself if Yellowstone or what's it, Toba or whatever goes off. Or, yeah, I think it's Toba. The other super volcano in Indonesia. I can't remember which one it was. I can't remember the names of every volcano in the fucking world. But Nibiru is pretty low on the list of things I think we have to worry about in an apocalyptic fashion. Number 1 is nuclear war. Number 2, I would say, probably would be epidemic. Those would be the big 2. And number 3, honestly, probably the loss of carbon in agricultural soils. I think that might doom us quicker than the other 2. That's definitely in contention. We are running out of the things that we need to reliably produce food because people, they keep doing the monoculture factory farm thing, draining their soil with chemical fertilizers being needed for a lot of crops, instead of using a lot of methods that have been employed for half a century that actually can feed the world, some of which are actually more efficient. They just simply require a little bit more time and attention. I think that we should probably start switching farming methods whenever possible. I think someone was mentioning last night hugelkultur or something. It's similar to the concept that I'm employing, which is lasagna gardening. Lasagna gardening is thick organic layers of stuff that will compost over time, adding to the soil. For several years, your soil is vastly improved. You get a lot more worms, a lot more bacteria, good bacteria, in order to let your plants go. Aerates the soil nice and fluffy. You probably don't need to till it much at all. In fact, you shouldn't till it. If you're using lasagna gardening, don't till too much. Certainly no mechanical farming would be employed. But hugelkultur is basically, you take piles of wood in various arrangements, cover them over with inverted sod and topsoil, and then that begins to compost. And potentially 20 years of improved soil that will create literally a giant mound of carbon-rich soil that then can be spread out, and you can simply do more hugelkultur, or you can flatten it out, and for a few years you'd have basically perfect soil that would be level. But yeah, I'm going to be experimenting with these things. I'm telling you, if you're not, I'm not a prepper per se, but being prepared is a good thing. Having a firearm is a good thing. Having enough food on hand to last a month. Having a couple solar panels to run a space heater is probably a decent idea. Knowing the basic skills, knowing how to grow food is like a lost art. It's really weird. A lot of people, they think food grows on the shelf in the store. But as for Nibiru, who cares? It's going to be, those are the big three. Crop failure due to bad farming methods is number 3. Epidemic is number 2. And the big one, number 1, is still nuclear war. It's the biggest threat that we face. Those are the big 3. Worry about them. About an asteroid, we can't really do anything about it if it is coming. Nibiru does not exist. It's not there. I hate to use the term because it was made by the government to smear people, but it is a conspiracy theory. People defy all existent science and observation in order to believe that it's actually out there somewhere. It's not. So focus on, the Spanish flu might come back, or something like that. Those are legitimate doomsday concerns, or if not doomsday, at the very least apocalyptic concerns. Some of them are, they're not all made equal. That's about all. Peace out.